Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Shang. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. The Chinese people's frustration with zero-COVID policy has reached a boiling point. It manifested in protests across multiple cities in China, with people taking to the streets and demanding an end to harsh lockdowns. Many held up pieces of blank white paper, protesting wordlessly against censorship. A few others went beyond criticizing public health restrictions, taking aim at the authoritarian political system. It has been more than 30 years since China has seen simultaneous and spontaneous protests that cut across social groups, coupled with calls for freedom. There is no question that this is a momentous juncture in 21st century Chinese history. This is perhaps the first time that Chinese citizens have rallied together to resist a national policy, and it appeared that Beijing has changed course. Since the development of vaccines, most countries have emerged from pandemic controls and returned to normal. China is still obsessed to eliminate the virus. As a result, the so-called zero-COVID policy damaged the economy, sucking dry local governments' finances, provoked widespread anger against ruling Communist Party. Xi cares about security and social stability more than the economy. So, why does he sabotage his own rule? Beijing's official explanation is this: the Chinese government fears that a surge of COVID-19 cases could overwhelm hospitals, especially given inadequate vaccination among the elderly. Do you buy that? I, for one, do not buy it. It fits CCP's claim that protecting lives is our top priority. In reality, harsh lockdowns have caused deaths from accidents, depression, and denied medical care. Then, why China insists zero COVID? It is simple. Because Xi Jinping said so. In the very beginning, Xi said so. Given his unprecedented power, no one in the bureaucracy, no one in the political elites dared to call his command into question, even when it did not make sense. How can you eliminate the coronavirus? But as Xi has successfully centralized the power as much as Mao Zedong did, Xi has become the modern equivalent of an imperial emperor, equipped with evasive high-tech state capacity. Under his command, the bureaucracy has become obsessed not so much with saving lives, but rather with maintaining the leader's holy number, zero. During the early stages of the pandemic, when the virus was novel and dangerous and there was no vaccine, China's strategy of mass testing, citywide lockdowns, and centralized quarantine contained the virus spread. For Xi, China's low fatality numbers, well, if you believe China's official tally, have been a rare and prized triumph, especially given the intense criticism directed at him when the virus first broke out. It simultaneously validated his claims about the superiority of China's top-down political system over liberal democracy and gave him great pride in beating the West. As other countries learned to live with the virus, China's leadership remained attached to zero COVID. With the emergence of the highly transmissible but milder Omicron variant, this approach became increasingly obsolete, even absurd. But still, local governments did not want any cases to emerge on their watch. Accordingly, their response has been to enforce relentless blanket lockdowns, spray disinfectants in the streets, and quarantine people who have been exposed but have no symptoms. The absurdity of these measures only reveal their true goal is not protecting people's health, but rather meeting political target, keeping the numbers at zero. At the 20th Party Congress in October, Xi proclaimed we must resolutely stick to dynamic zero COVID without wavering, Proving that there was no empty words, he promoted Li Qiang to the party's number 2 position. Li Qiang was mayor of Shanghai when he oversaw a 2-month lockdown there. Shanghai lockdown drew widespread complaints from residents and businesses. For officials, the message was clear. Enforcing zero COVID brings rewards, regardless of the costs. Initially, there was high hope that after the Party Congress, the leadership would loosen China's COVID-19 controls. On November 11th, the National Health Council issued a directive known as the 20 Measures. The order included some specific instructions to loosen restrictions. For example, a reduction in the number of quarantine days required for inbound travelers, and the right for people in high-risk areas to isolate at home instead of in centralized quarantine facilities. Investors interpret this document as a sign of China's imminent exit from the pandemic, and the stock markets briefly rallied. In fact, the new measures were not aimed at ending COVID-19 controls, but rather at refining them, and it assigned officials a virtually impossible mission: prevent the virus from spreading and, at the same time, stabilize the economy. In effect, Beijing's conflicting instructions shifted all the blames and responsibility onto local governments. If the virus spreads, it is their fault. If the economy suffers, it is also their fault. Confused, some cities loosened the controls and tightened again, whereas others imposed more controls. On November 25th, a deadly residential fire broke out in the city of Urumqi. Rescue efforts were apparently delayed by barricades commonly used to block residents from leaving their homes during lockdowns. For many people in China, this was the last straw. If it's not me this time, it could be me next time, one viral post on social media reads. This tragedy came in the midst of a grim economic situation. More than 460,000 businesses closed nationwide in the first quarter of 2022, and the youth unemployment has reached nearly 20%. Meanwhile, many of those who caught the virus have learned that it was not as serious as the state propaganda wanted them to believe. Some citizens have realized that their suffering is the result of a senseless, needless policy rather than the virus itself. Protests aren't new in China. Data gathered by researchers show that the protests break out regularly in the country. A large number of protests in China go unreported. There are a number of reasons. 1, they happen in remote areas. 2, many are localized in nuance or because censors smother information about them. But the portion that can be documented offers a sense of how common they are. From June to October this year, U.S. think tank Freedom House recorded nearly 600 instances of group protests across China involving marches, demonstrations, and obstruction of roads, of which almost 80% involved more than 10 people. Researchers tracked protests using keyword searches on Chinese social media, domestic and international media reports, and a network of local non-governmental organizations. Most documented cases were about delayed housing projects, financial disputes, or fraud, and were directed either against the local governments or individual companies. The recent COVID-19 protests bear similarities to the smaller, lesser-known outbursts of dissent, though they are also different in significant ways. Local protests against COVID-19 controls had been going on since earlier this year. What changed in late November is that the local protests started connecting with each other and coalescing into a bigger collective us that is frustrated with zero COVID. Yet, these demonstrators do not yet constitute a revolutionary force. The acts of civil disobedience in late November have included quiet vigils for the deceased, forceful dismantling of pandemic control barricades, vigorous chants for freedom, and bold calls for Xi to step down. Although the political protests attract the most media attention, many on the streets appear to be demanding only their physical freedom and the rights to their livelihood, not political change. Moreover, there could be a silent majority that complies with the state policies and supports the Chinese Communist Party and Xi. Xi remains popular among nationalists and those who benefit from his anti-poverty policies. However, while the anti-lockdown protests are not a color revolution, they are the first public display of defiance against a national policy that Xi has encountered under his iron fist rule. The situation leaves him in a bind. If he lets the protesters go, he fears he will encourage more of such audacity. If he cracks down, he will create a deeper and wider grievance. Since 1989, the ruling Communist Party has developed a much more sophisticated series of strategies for repression. It knows that a violent crackdown in public view is too costly. Beijing's experience with Hong Kong would suggest that mass protests may continue for a while, but afterward, the government can put an end to defiance by punishing protesters one by one. It is so-called settling scores after the fall. What happens next depends on whether Xi chooses to act with pragmatism and moderation or with brutality. Regardless, Xi has unintentionally accomplished something profound. His zero-COVID policy has made every Chinese citizen, rich or poor, old or young, male or female, appreciate the value of their limited freedoms. Every Chinese people now understand that personal freedom is not an abstract Western value, but a deeply personal value and a dignity. Individual freedom is bigger than collective responsibility, at least on the issue of zero COVID. This awakening has sprayed seeds of meaningful democracy in China. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.